Frankenstein created life. Was his crime the making or the abandoning? Prometheus stole fire. Franklin flew a kite. Did he steal Earth's light or God's weapon? Oppenheimer unleashed the atom. When does celestial fire become forever guilt? And what's the true punishment for genius? The eagle or the moral burden? So welcome back to the second part of the Prometheus and Frankenstein series. I hope you listened to the first part. I hope you enjoyed it. So if you happen to find this episode first, try to find the other part, actually, so that the whole thing makes more sense. So with this episode, we're going to talk about the influence, of course, of Prometheus on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then, of course, on her influence on modern creators. Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast. I'm your host, Onouphilios Dovlepis. The influence of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was quite profound, I would say, on the films of Tim Burton, and that was really important for his very unique artistic vision. In 1990, he made Edward Scissorhands, starring Johnny Depp, who I think could have been his muse, if we can say that. Edward is the most direct analog to Frankenstein's creature. He is a synthetic creation made by a solitary scientist, left unfinished and isolated upon his creator's death. Then, in 2012, he made Frankenweenie. This stop-motion film is a direct, loving parody and homage to Frankenstein, of course. The protagonist is even named Victor Frankenstein. He uses the knowledge of science and the power of lightning to resurrect his beloved dog, Sparky. The resulting monster is pure love and loyalty. Unlike Shelley's Victor, this young Victor acts out of love and grief for his dog, not hubris or ambition for glory. Many of Tim Burton's films explore the idea of life being brought back. In 2005, 7 years before Frankenweenie, he made Corpse Bride. The core thematic structure echoes Frankenstein. Also, The Nightmare Before Christmas from 1993, Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King. He's essentially a beautifully drawn, reanimated corpse. And finally, in the recent Beetlejuice sequel from 2024, Beetlejuice's ex-wife, Dolores. Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci, is a very strong example. She's introduced as a hacked-up corpse who uses a staple gun to reassemble herself limb by limb. This grotesque, stitched-together reanimation is a direct visual descendant of the Frankenstein monster. Bellucci, by the way, was Burton's partner at the time, as was Helena Bonham Carter, who played the Corpse Bride. A decade earlier, Helena Bonham Carter had also played Elizabeth, Frankenstein's fiancée, in the 1994 movie with Kenneth Branagh. Prometheus didn't only, of course, influence Mary Shelley and her Frankenstein, it also had an impact in modern Greece roughly a century ago. So this Promethean spirit of reanimation was embodied by the poet Angelos Akelianos and the American researcher, choreographer Eva Palmer. The two got married in the United States because she was from New York in 1907. Driven by this quest for a new world enlightenment, they initiated the Grand Delphic Festivals in 1927. Of course, they took place in Delphi, as you say in English, which was the oracle of Apollo, the god of light and music. And they saw this revival as the Promethean gift of culture being returned to the modern world. Of course, the play they staged was Prometheus Bound. So you can see how everything kind of goes full circle. In 1930, they would do the second Delphic Festival, so we had two. They were successful, but eventually the couple's relationship crumbled and they got divorced in 1940. The ultimate tragedy, let's say, occurred years later. After Sakelianos dies, in 1952, Eva Palmer returns to Greece. She goes to Delphi again. She's watching Prometheus, directed now by a different director. She has a heart attack and dies in the theater. The very place she had sought to ignite a cultural fire for all humanity. Both Palmer and Sakelianos were buried in the nearby cemetery, which you can even actually see from the site. If you've listened to this, hopefully, and remember this story with this magnificent, tragic, in a way, romantic, in another way, story, you can actually look for this. Despite the irony that we have in this romantic story, as I told you, which involves an ancient tragedy, a real life tragedy was the life of Mary Shelley herself. Let's look at some things in the life of Mary Shelley, who actually lived, I would say, a relentless series of personal tragedies and misfortunes. So, right after she's born, just 11 days later, her mother dies. Her father will remarry in the next 4 years to Mary Jane Claremont, who will be her stepmother and will never get along with Mary. At the age of 16, in 1814, she elopes with the married poet Percy Shelley, and her stepsister Claire Claremont follows them. This will make her father, William Godwin, disown her and refuse to speak to her for years. At the age of 17 already, she gives birth to a premature daughter, Clara, who dies less than 2 weeks later. At the age of 19, her half-sister, Fanny Godwin, committed suicide. Weeks later, Percy Shelley's first wife drowned herself. At the age of 20, her second daughter, Clara Everina, dies at the age of 1. In 1819, at the age of 21, her son William died of malaria at the age of 3.5. And then in 1822, at the age of 24 already, her husband dies. Percy Shelley drowned in a sudden storm while sailing in Italy. So she was left a widow with one surviving son, Percy Florence, born in 1819, and faced significant difficulties and was forced to return to England. Despite her difficulties in life and this constant grief that of course would have tormented her, she achieved some remarkable success back then. Of course, Frankenstein is the main thing that she's known for even now, although some people say, and it might be true, that Percy Shelley's involvement might be quite large. Some people say that he even practically co-wrote the book. Who knows? Maybe some scholars really know, some academics really know. Maybe we can't really know for sure, but he was involved, that we know. But she didn't stop writing after Frankenstein. She published several books which were respected in her time, like Valperga in 1823, or The Last Man in 1826, which is considered one of the earliest examples of apocalyptic fiction depicting a future world ravaged by plague. Of course, after her husband, Percy Shelley, died, she dedicated her life to preserving his work. Interestingly, in Athens, in Plaka, in the old town below the Acropolis, we have two streets that connect. One is called Byron. It's the place where Lord Byron stayed when he visited Athens, and it connects to the street that is called Shelley. It's dedicated to Percy Shelley, not Mary Shelley, even though she wrote a novel which has a connection to Greek mythology with Prometheus, but it was Percy Shelley, her husband, who said that we are all Greeks, meaning the influence of ancient Greece to the Western world. This episode is about this whole metaphor, the use of the myth of Prometheus. In 2012, a different movie used the name Prometheus again. It was a sci-fi movie, part of the Alien universe, Prometheus. The film was titled Prometheus because the entire narrative is a modern retelling of the core themes found in the ancient Greek myth. The exploration vessel carrying the crew to some distant moon was named by a billionaire financing the expedition. He sees himself as a modern-day Prometheus, one who seeks to seize the fire of immortality and creation from the gods, the engineers, for his own benefit. This name reflects the overreaching ambition of the human mission. What is the film's fire, though? The crew is trying to find the engineers, their creators. Their mission is to discover the secret of human origin and perhaps even immortality. This quest for forbidden godlike knowledge is the film's central theft of fire. Just as Prometheus was severely punished for his act, the human crew faces monstrous, terrifying consequences for daring to confront the creators and steal their secrets. The film was directed by Ridley Scott and performed quite well, and it grossed $400 million. It starred Mimi Rapaz, Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, Idris Elba, Logan Marshall Green, and Charlize Theron. A lot of famous people here. The application of the term modern Prometheus as a critique of scientific ambition predates Mary Shelley's novel. Its origin is in Enlightenment philosophy and the early history of electrical science. So the term modern Prometheus was first established by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T, by the way, Kant. In 1775, Kant wrote an essay under this title, Modern Prometheus. He used the concept to caution the world against the dangers posed by figures such as Benjamin Franklin. So Kant referred to Franklin as the new Prometheus for, quotation marks, stealing the fire of heaven and seeking to disarm the thunder. This linkage stemmed directly from Franklin's pioneering 1752 experiments, which successfully demonstrated that lightning was a form of electricity. This warning was given concrete weight, by the way, by the tragedy of Georg Richman, a physicist who was fatally electrocuted in Russia in 1753, the following year after the experiment of Franklin, while he was trying to replicate Benjamin Franklin's experiment. The archetype of Prometheus achieved its ultimate 20th century cultural relevance through the biography of J. Robert Oppenheimer. In 2005, some 20 years ago, was published the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, American Prometheus, The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer, by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. The theoretical physicist who directed the Manhattan Project is widely regarded as the modern-day version of the Greek Titan. Just as the Titan stole celestial fire and gave it to humanity, Oppenheimer gave humankind atomic fire, in quotation marks, through the development of the first nuclear weapons, the ones that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. When Oppenheimer attempted to assert moral control over the atomic power he created, the powers that be, like Zeus, rose up in anger to punish him, and of course ultimately silenced him. His punishment included the revocation of his security clearance and profound, lifelong moral guilt over his creation. This is portrayed in the movie by Christopher Nolan from 2023, starring Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer. This whole thing is depicted very, very well, especially the procedure with which they tried to present him as someone evil, as a traitor, as a communist, and erase everything that he had ever done. The enduring nature of Oppenheimer's suffering mirrors the eternal torment of the chained Titan. The film, by the way, grossed over $975 million and won several awards, amongst which 7 Oscars. If you haven't watched it, it's really worth watching. Don't miss it. So where does all of this leave us? The story of Prometheus began with a divine tyrant, Zeus, punishing a selfless champion for his gift of fire. But as the archetype evolved through history, from the electrical experiments of Benjamin Franklin to the Gothic horror of Victor Frankenstein, and finally to the atomic era of Oppenheimer, the oppressor changed. The central question of the Promethean myth, now and forever, is not just what knowledge can we obtain, but rather who must bear the ethical burden and the suffering when the limits of creation are transgressed. Wait.
Whatever happened to the Titan, though?
Well, while performing one of his 12 labors, Heracles, a son of Zeus, killed the eagle with an arrow and then smashed Prometheus's chains, setting him free. Zeus was willing to let his son Heracles gain glory by performing this heroic act. So Prometheus' suffering ended with a heroic rescue and a strategic reconciliation with the king of the gods, the one who actually really caused the whole thing to begin with, because, of course, behind every myth is always Zeus. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onufrios Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.